Hello, everyone. We've reached the end almost, and it's been a wonderful conference. I am the last speaker, and then Drew speaks after me. As you know, I've been Miss Geoengineering for the last almost 13 years now. I never thought of myself that way before I met Clifford Carnicom, the independent scientist that I became friends with and began to study what he was finding in those old blue skies of northern New Mexico so long ago. And he began to be the one to blow the whistle on a technology that is still almost absent from any news source that you would ever hear from other than some alternative press and people on the internet who are taking photos of the sky and slowly waking up to the fact that these are not contrails, that contrails are a distant memory now. Everything is chemical up there, even the clouds. These are not moisture clouds. These are plasma clouds. And that the engineering of the world, of the planet, has everything to do with the move toward transhumanism now. So what I'm going to do today is a little different than my norm because I only have an hour to present, and I'm accustomed to having at least an hour and a half, if not 2 hours, to do justice to how in my most recent book, I tie everything together. And the book is for sale back here. It's a whopping $55, $5 for the shipping I had to pay to get the book here. It's a 3-pound book, 650 pages. And it's daunting, but I highly recommend to people to read it in a group if you can, because it's much more, it's much more accessible if you can talk about it. But anyway, the title of the book is Geoengineered Transhumanism, how the Earth has been weaponized. Is that the name? What is the name? Has been weaponized by chemicals, electromagnetism, and nanotechnology for synthetic biology. So I took 5 big subjects and put them together. This is not normal to do this, but I had to do it because that's how this program that started years ago with Project Cloverleaf, how it's ended up. It's ended up as a massive planetary system run by AI that controls all the weather, et cetera, and I'll get to that in this. So I'm gonna do the geoengineering at the beginning, just very briefly, and then go into some of the synthetic biology, go in and out, and that's the way it's gonna go today. Drew told me I could do it the way I wanted to, and I wanted to do it a little differently. First of all, where's my clicker? Let me see if I know how to operate this. Down is forward. Which is down? This looks like up. Oh, that was backwards. Okay, I'm getting the hang of it. All right, so the title, you notice, is What Does It Mean to Be Human? I think that's one of the blessings that's coming out of these dark 3 years that we've been through, is now we are, most of us, at least in this country that I'm most familiar with, we are having to reconsider taking our humanity for granted. I'm dedicating this presentation to three greats from the history of the geoengineering, anti-geoengineering movement I don't think you even knew existed. You probably don't even know now that it existed. We never talk about our past. It's an internet movement, which makes it a little weird, but I have known and read the work and talked with the people who are all sort of the cutting edge leaders of this anti-geoengineering movement that's now about 20 years old. So first, Rosalind Peterson. Rosalind is a former crop inspector for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in California. She was the founder of the Agriculture Defense Coalition. She was the keynote speaker at the UN 60th Annual DPI/NGO Conference on Climate Change in 2007. She was a force to be reckoned with, fantastic person. She died a few years ago. She was friends with two California biologists. I want to mention their names. Their work is still up on the net. Alan Buckman, and who is former California Department of Fish and Game, and Francis Mangels, who also worked with the USDA. These are people who blew the whistle and kept blowing. They were intrepid. And you can see how far we've gotten. It looks like nothing, because now you still don't hear about the real geoengineering that's going on. And they have a few CIA plants in the movement who have formed limited hangouts to contain people's understanding of how far the geoengineering really goes. It's not just about solar radiation management by any means. So that started with Rosalind. The next person, Michael J. Murphy. Michael J. Murphy directed 3 films. What in the World Are They Spraying? That came out in 2010. Why in the World Are They Spraying? In 2012. You can get both of those films on the internet for free. And the third, unfinished film, when I posit that Michael Murphy was murdered, was called An Unconventional Shade of Gray. And it is, as I said, unfinished because the film was basically stolen and the copies have all disappeared. He died in 2020. So the third one is my buddy. Without him, I could not have written the second book I wrote. First book was Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance on Planet Earth. Came out in 2012. Second book, Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown. And I could not have written that book without Billy Hayes, because he is the man who understood how it was all being done. He was an MK Ultra survivor of the CIA, and he had been controlled by them since he was 8 years old. And he had been programmed to memorize everything you can possibly imagine about electromagnetics. So he was the guy I would turn to. He took me under his wing because he said, "You have another book to write," and it was true. And he led me all the way through all the mechanics of laying the space fence, Lockheed Martin space fence out on the Earth. And we are now subject to it. You call it the smart grid. It's very complex. It's completely sophisticated and over the entire Earth. And Billy is the one who helped me lay that out and analyze it in the Under an Ionized Sky. By the way, you don't need to read the previous 2 books in order to read the most recent book. I have also now just finished another version of this book as far as the geoengineering goes for the publisher Inner Traditions. They asked for a second edition, and I'm to write it in 2 books, one on the geoengineering and one on the synthetic biology. So as soon as I get home from this trip, I will start writing the synthetic biology. All right, so I wanted to dedicate it to them. Let me see. Okay, so we're just going to go through, and I wanted to mention regarding Billy and the CIA and the military involvement in this program. Most recently, you may have seen on the internet the 2 women, Sasha Latipova and Catherine Watt, have now analyzed many documents that have come to the fore that proves that the American military, and I would imagine NATO, have been involved in controlling the entire COVID-19 operation. So it isn't just Pfizer and AstraZeneca and the big pharma, though they certainly bear their burden as well, but it is the military. And what I'm going to show you today will show you that what Clifford Carnicom was finding back in the mid to late 90s and on that was dropping from the sky, has everything to do with what's in the serums now and being injected into people's bodies. All right, so up in our sky, we now have this great ionospheric heater with the very cool acronym HAARP. And the first book that came out was in 1995 by Nick Begich and Gene Manning called Angels Don't Play This HAARP. HAARP is basically a phased array antenna farm. And the phased array antenna is very particular kind of antenna that that can be made to form beams, very powerful beams. So we'll see a picture of it a little later. From the mid-90s to summer 2013, the US Air Force, the Navy, DARPA, and Geophysical Institute at the University of Alaska at Fairbanks conducted exotic experiments on the ionosphere, 49 to 428 miles above the Earth, utilizing the high-frequency active auroral research project HAARP ionospheric heater in Gakona, Alaska. HAARP is a phased array antenna farm with 180 antenna units that can create powerful beams that force the ionosphere to spiral ions down along naturally occurring divergent magnetic field lines to create electron-cyclotron resonance highways that bind the upper and lower atmospheres to one another and vibrate our biology and subtle bodies in perilous ways. Thus, electrons and ions are trapped and forced to oscillate back and forth to create artificial plasma mirrors as well as clouds. Like passing a radio frequency current through a concentric coil, like a Tesla coil, with the axial magnetic field confining the plasma. So HAARP technology is part of a global ionospheric heater network serving the C5 ISR, which is command, control, communications, computers, combat, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. Strategically placed sky heaters now stretch for thousands of miles under the sustained artificial plasma density cloud deck. By calibrating timing with other ionospheric heaters, HAARP waves can be pulsed via high-frequency interfering transmission beams to designated areas on and below the surface of the Earth. You may remember when we would talk about the military years ago, it was always with the idea that the military had to do with foreign enemies. That is no longer true. It has to do with domestic. We have to change that programming that we underwent from the Cold War, dump that, and get with the program here, so to speak. HAARP patents were originally owned by the CIA first, then Raytheon Corporation, the second largest US military contractor after Lockheed Martin, which now Lockheed Martin owns all the space fence patents. The line between the CIA and big corporate players that Eisenhower warned us of in the military-industrial complex is virtually non-existent. Our lives down here on Earth are immersed in the same chemical electromagnetic operations now dedicated to full spectrum dominance, planetary control. Around us on the Earth, in near-Earth orbit, in space, embedded in forests and GMO food fields and smart cities, we are all plugged in to what we call the smart grid and what Lockheed Martin calls the space fence. From power lines to wireless computers and their routers and wireless iPhones, to microwave towers, Gwen towers, NexRads, fiber optic cable, phased array antennas and radar installations, smart meters, the Internet of Things, mobile and stationary ionospheric heaters, cloud seeding and ionization pluviculture corporations, wind farms, fracking wells, and all the rest, we are all plugged in now. I just want to be really clear about that. And if you don't think that is the biggest elephant in the living room, you must not understand what I'm saying. So I'm going to go on, of course. All right, so next, let's see what the next one is. All right, we know this. We watch this all the time. Those jets up there with all those ducts open, not just coming from the combustion chamber, but coming from the wings, coming from all over the place. The entire atmosphere now is controlled by the space fence. And I'm going to lay out what the space fence is, just so you can get a mental picture. Back in the Reagan era of the 80s, the Star Wars space fence was a belt of radar installations across the southern continental United States, from sea to shining sea. The claim of the US Air Force was they were tracking space junk. That's all they were doing. But what it was really about was setting up a global network-centric warfare system called an NCW under artificial intelligence so as to master the human domain, basically full spectrum dominance over planet Earth by means of geoengineering, GMOs, genetics, synthetic biology, vaccinations, Wi-Fi, 5G, 6G, and the Internet of Things, electromagnetic targeting of individuals and populations, mind control and transhumanism, all connected by a common globalist intent. So that's what Canadian herbalist Tony Pantalaresco, I always recommend him to people for helping them handle their symptoms from this technology. Tony wrote me and said he calls Morgellons, that I'm going to talk about, nano-assemblage, because Morgellons is a nanotechnology. About the space fence, he says, quote, space fence composition is primarily carbon. There is a reason why so many of the foods consumed today have sugar, which is carbon, made from GMO corn. 50% of the American body composition today is carbon, and why they proclaim that we are carbon-based. In our natural state, before this, we were not carbon-based. That was what they saw us being in the future, and we were conditioned to believe we were carbon-based. We are more protein than anything else, unless you have been genetically modified. That's what Tony said. All right, so I've named some of the technologies. I'll do it one more time and then I'll move on, but I wanted to make sure that you understand that the ionospheric heaters that we just saw with HAARP, there are hundreds now, many of them smaller, not as big as HAARP, not as powerful. And then with the chemical trails coming from the jets, these chemicals are all pre-chosen for various reasons, not just military. This is all about controlling planet Earth, full spectrum dominance over planet Earth under the secret space program, as Catherine Austin Fitts has called it, and I agree with her. So they're now using this ionized atmosphere. That's what our atmosphere is. They control the entire ionosphere. They control the jet stream. That's why they can control all the weather and the long-term climate. And these chemicals, imagine, can you think of who they come from? Well, that's Big Pharma. Just like Big Pharma just gave us the vax, Big Pharma has controlled the chemical delivery through our own military and now around the world, because we're not the only ones doing this now. And they run experiments up there, and you see some of them. You might see a little whirligig. You might see what they call in the press a meteor streaking across the distant sky. We're lied to about all that. That's NASA's job, is to take care of the lying and the propaganda. Meanwhile, they're running all these experiments for the space age that they're in service to. Utilize extreme electrical weather events, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, etc., to keep the atmosphere charged. Plasma and antimatter farming. Man-made Birkeland currents, not just the real Birkeland currents, but man-made ones, the Alvin Whistler waves, making those too. Rotating electric fields by the Hutchison effect. Rotating plasma under stress to convert transverse waves into longitudinal scalar waves, because this is all scalar technology now. We've left the realm of Einstein and Newton. We're in a whole other quantum kind of science now. And meanwhile, you're not being educated to understand what's going on. Holography, pretty soon they're going to invade us with UFO fleets. It'll be holography. Exotic propulsion systems, etc. So who are all the parts, especially the ones on the Earth? That's the thing, is that this system, this space fence, starts above the planet, and I'll show something that reveals how that's done, and it comes all the way down onto the planet. So above us, dealing with creating effects in the atmosphere, that would be ionospheric heaters, jet engines with wing pylon drain tubes, chemical trails, air pharmacology, ocean delivery systems, WSAC, steam release to make extra clouds, pluviculture, rocket plume burns, dusty plasma, same thing as smart dust, satellites, particle accelerators like CERN, we've all heard of CERN, the Wigner effect, artificial intelligence, solar lunar simulators, fake suns and fake moons up there. While below on the Earth, we have microwave towers, Gwen towers, radar installations, Starfire laser and LIDAR, NEXRADs, SBX golf balls, wind farms, fracking well stems, fiber optic cables, solar panels, smart meters, Wi-Fi, IoT, IONT, Internet of Nano Things, IOB, Internet of Bodies, nanobiotechnology, lighting. We're involved in their dual-use technology. So they're utilizing our energy systems at the same time they're creating their own energy systems in the ionized, electrified sky now. So that's all going on. Then as far as the weather, which I know you're concerned about, let's watch this one. Do I just press it again to get it to play? Okay. You can see it play, and just keep your sight, your eyes zero in on the one tiny, tiny contrail. You can get an idea of what a contrail looks like above these chemical trails that are leaving long, long streaks that eventually become cloud cover, as you know, like a cirrus cloud cover. And there it is. See it way up there at the top? That's a contrail. You see how long it lasts? Not very long at all, right? It's evaporating super fast. Not so with the chemical trails. The chemical trails are purposely left to create what we breathe, because we're breathing all this, and it's going into our lungs and then our bloodstreams and then into our organs, and our brains. Okay. So here are the 7 geoengineering operations. Clifford Carnicom came up with this list. I've tweaked it a few times. Weather engineering, yes, all the weather is controlled now. There is no natural weather except the natural weather that I'll read about now. Oh, and as far as the jets go, I'll put that in there. They're at 30,000 feet plus. Temperature where it's negative 40 centigrade with 67 plus percentage humidity. Chemtrails are generally laid above 28,000 feet, and commercial airlines travel at 32 to 34,000 feet, and they are definitely involved in this program. Their pilots used to have to sign NDAs. I don't know how it is now because most of the pilots are running automatic ships, so most of the chemicals are being laid from the ground by people making the decisions from the ground. Okay, so for the weather engineering, let me just read this quickly. As coastal air pressure is bundled into a north-south laser-induced plasma channel, an LIPC, off the west coast, moisture from the South Pacific is folded into it and shunted north to the jet stream loop over Vancouver Island, which is just north of me in the Pacific Northwest, which then piggybacks the additional moisture east for weather operations in the Midwest, Texas, Florida, and the Atlantic coast, etc. That's how it's done with with differently shaped laser beams, such as the TerraMobile laser system. The LIPC waveguide can be made into an S shape to hit an obstacle and reconstitute itself on the other side of the Earth. So this control over the jet stream is what gives them the keys to the kingdom as far as our weather goes. From the Mariana Islands to Hawaii, through the Kwajalein Atoll, a line of transmitters fires northeast in a repetitious pulse, an invisible wall of radio waves, all the way to Alaska that creates a funneling effect. Fire radio frequency into a front that's been seeded with aluminum nanoparticles, and a plasma-dense field arises, while the pressure wall off of Mexico acts like the bumper on a billiard table to roll the weather system north along the California-Oregon coastline to Vancouver Island, and the jet stream ready to be pushed east and south through Wyoming and the Dakotas and into Kansas, where NEXRAD and wind farm pulses will kick in to build high pressure for tornadoes, superstorms, floods, etc. As far as earthquakes, they're generally triggered from far up in space or in the upper atmosphere by the tomographic features of these ionospheric heaters like HAARP. And that has to do with what they call interferometry, where they cross beams from various ionospheric heaters, like at least 2 and sometimes 3, in order to produce things like earthquake events. So it just gives you an idea of how the technology works. Going through the rest of the 7 geoengineering operations, the chemical electromagnetic, the creation of artificial plasma density clouds, and maintenance of a conductive ionized atmosphere as a space fence matrix for building and steering extreme weather events, communications, and directed energy operations. Plasma and antimatter farming is going on, creation and manipulation of Birkeland currents, etc. Next is the planetary geophysical operations. Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev's 3 phases of technological achievement for any civilization aspiring to a space age is first, full spectrum dominance over one's planet, then full spectrum dominance over one star, that would be our sun, and its systems, all its systems, and third would be full spectrum dominance over the solar system and the entire galaxy. multiple solar, ionosphere, and magnetosphere experiments via, via HARP and CERN technologies are going on all the time, as is Earth energy harvesting control from space by AI systems that oversee droughts, wildfires, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes that serve economic real estate investment trusts and environmental modification. Directed energy weapons, that's a little complicated now because, as I said, they're using our stuff down here, all our lovely convenience items like the IoT, the Internet of Things. But the directed energy warfare, a global ionospheric heater network now exists as part of the global system, command control, et cetera. The 1990s Revolution in Military Affairs, RMA, irrevocably changed the nature of warfare to asymmetric warfare via nonlinear physics. Warfare is now about full spectrum dominance over both the electromagnetic spectrum and the civilian spectrum, slated to be transmuted into transhumans and run by internet remote control. Instabilities in the systems are identified by trillions of nanosensors everywhere in our smart grid environment, including our bodies and brains, then exploited via remote application of electromagnetic signatures, pulses, and frequencies. Directed energy weapons include the macro scale of scalar interferometry, lasers and masers, particle beams, high-powered microwaves, and cloaking. The less macro, dual-use, convenience, Internet of Things, technologies, and the micro nanotechnology ensconced in our bodies and brains. Then you have the surveillance and neural manipulation, which is basically mind control, and artificial intelligence, remote neural monitoring, RNM, otherwise known as targeting from space, 5G access to our DNA. Back in 2013, when WikiLeaks whistleblower Edward Snowden escaped to Moscow, he made it clear that HARP was engaged in assassination and mind control, saying, quote, "When WikiLeaks staff and I were in transit between Hong Kong and Moscow, we had to fend off the constant threat of radio-generated homicidal delusions," end of quote. His room at the airport hotel in Moscow was subsequently set up as a Faraday cage. Then the nanotech, digital synthetic biology, and transhumanism, that gets into the most important thing I think there is now on a technological level, which is nanotechnology. That was a revolution that happened about 30 years ago, maybe 40, and we were never told anything about it. In fact, Congress didn't even know about it until 2002, and then they just signed a blank check for it, because it is probably considered the holy grail of physics now, physics and biotechnology. It includes hive mind capabilities, nanobots, nanorobots, nanosensors, microprocessors, electro-opticals, and we're breathing all this in. We're eating it in the GMO foods and probably organic as well. We drink it. We're inoculated with it. These are remote genetic re-engineering of DNA, the virtual sentient world simulation, SWS, that replaces the natural with the virtual. Precision medicine is making big use of it for getting drugs into people's systems at a distance. So you know that if it's at a distance, you're dealing with digital transmissions, you're not dealing with molecular contagion and things like that. And then finally, I'll talk about that one when I get to an example of it. The last one is cloaking, obscuration, and detection of exotic propulsion craft. And yes, we do have very, very exotic propulsion craft. That is no secret. There are books on it. You just have to find them. This is independent scientist Clifford Carnicom, the one who began the work on Morgellons that was in the what was coming down from the jets. And I still work with him because he's seeing now the correlations between what he was finding 25 years ago and what is going on with the inoculations now and the impact on human blood post-inoculation. So Clifford said this back in 2004, it can be demonstrated that the introduction of essentially any metallic or metallic salt aerosol into the lower atmosphere will have the effect of heating up that lower atmosphere. The impact is both significant and measurable. Those who seek and express concern about the so-called global warming program might wish to begin their search with an inquiry into the thermodynamics of artificially introduced metallic aerosols into the lower atmosphere. An examination of the specific heat characteristics of an altered atmosphere will provide the path for the realistic conclusions that can be made. Any claim that the aerosol operations represent a mitigating influence on the global warming problem appears to be a complete facade in direct contradiction to the fundamental principles of physics and thermodynamics. The lack of candor and honesty by the government, media, and environmental protection agencies in response to public inquiry is further evidence of the fictitious fronts that have been proposed. So that was, 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, and look how they still control the news and still control the people's ability to know about these programs. It's just amazing. And it's dangerous for people like me and others who have basically given their lives to getting it out to the public so the public knows what is going on with the real geoengineering. But these are choices that we make of our own free will. So I don't complain. Yeah. So back then, I mean, when I met Clifford at a breakfast, I immediately did his red wine test, which was to clean my mouth really well, and then take some red wine or grape juice and slosh it around, and then spit it into a clean dish, and then let the debris settle. And then I saw the Morgellons filament crawling across the bottom of the bowl. So that was a real wake up. And then the next thing we did is we drew my blood and we looked at it under the microscope. And I looked at my blood, which had some rouleau, as we hear that term now, where there's a stacking going on in the blood cells that is not natural. There was some rouleau, but generally speaking, my blood looked better than most other people's blood that we were examining. So this is on the blood.
How severe is this and how representative?
This was done recently.
Well, that was the concern. This is what got safe blood going so rapidly back in 2021. When we started seeing these slides, it was 100%. Everyone who came in that we sampled for dark field microscopy who had been vaccinated has this in a blood character.
That is just incredible. And I want to re-emphasize that by pulling up the side-by-side comparison for people that safe blood is saying 100% of the time on the left-hand side of your screen there, they are seeing the blood look like that as opposed to what it should look like on the right-hand side.
So that's now. And yet he has slides at his site, carnicominstitute.org, where you can see the same thing. He took very good photos of the blood coagulation going on with our inhalation from the Morgellons. I don't know that he had completely put that together yet, but he eventually did. In 1978, the earlier template of 6 kingdoms, plant kingdom, animal kingdom, fungal kingdom, etc., was replaced by 3 overarching domains, bacteria, archaea, and eukarya, based upon RNA. the lowest common denominator within the phylogenetic relationships of organisms. As independent scientist Clifford Carnicom described in his 2010 paper, Morgellons, A New Classification, quote, RNA became the blueprint of the structure of life as we know it, elevating and reducing at the same time the structural branches to 3 domains instead of 6 kingdoms, end of quote. Bioengineered Morgellons crosses the lines between all 3 domains. Thus, Carnicom renamed it the cross-domain bacteria, an extensive, repeating, and culturable life form with known properties and characteristics. So is it organic? Yes. Is it inorganic? Yes. It is both, and it is lab created. And there's a picture of what you see. I've known several Morgellons sufferers, and what happens is the skin actually breaks open at certain points, and then out comes these wires for one thing, and sort of pussy stuff, and it's very painful. When it opens, it feels like glass shards under the skin for the sufferers. These wires that come out are very sensitive to electromagnetic, like if you have your cell phone in your hand, where this sore is opening, these wires will just go nuts. So there is an electromagnetic element to it, just as in the Morgellons that I'm going to show now. This is the Morgellons fiber in the COVID-19 face mask. I haven't examined it to know it's Morgellons, but I'm sure it is. They were in the face masks. This is in the rainwater in Colorado. And then there's another thing now coming up, which is not just the Morgellons. It's still around. It's still in things. It's still in us. Yes, it's in all of us. But why don't we all have skin lesions? Well, that remains a question, because the skin is, in Chinese medicine, which I'm most familiar with. I'm not all that familiar with Western medicine. In Chinese medicine, the skin is corollary to the liver. So if the liver is overwhelmed, it could be that then you'll break out and try to rid yourself of these organisms, and that could be why. But this is now the latest thing that we're looking at, besides the Morgellons, which is around. It was in the face mask. It was in the PCR swabs. I've seen pictures of the PCR swabs have the same black fiber. That fiber is polymer, made of polymer. The actual Morgellons, the CBD, CDB, cross-domain bacteria, is inside the filament. But now we have the graphene oxide. And I know you've heard the term, if you've at all been on the internet, which I think most people here do. But the graphene oxide now is in the rainwater. I want to make that clear. It's not just in vaccines or in what's being inoculated into people, because these are not vaccines. It's also being dumped from the stratosphere. So those of us who haven't undergone the inoculations, we are breathing in the same stuff that is in the serum. And this tells us that it's a two-pronged attack from the sky and from the inoculations. So I would love to do, I wrote a big essay on graphene oxide because I think it's very interesting, but I won't have time to do that today. But yes, graphene oxide in rainwater, and it's also in our lungs. There it is in the Pfizer serum. You always know what it looks like because notice these two, see how thin they are? These are two-dimensional representations. Graphene oxide is actually called the holy grail of physics, but you can always tell it because it looks like a deflated something or other that's almost completely flat. It's only 1 atom thick. Here's what it looks like if you turn your cell phone on, and I actually wonder if this is what happens inside people when they turn their cell phone on.
Включится именно когда идет вызов. Пока выключен. Сейчас я набираю номер. И смотрите, что будет происходить. Вот он вызов пошел. Смотрите, что теперь.
Now it looks like a creature, I admit, and
Вызов идет, если вы можете смотреть, видите.
And Harald Kautz-Vella, who is a German scientist I'm in touch with, he believes it's from what he calls black goo. You may be familiar with that badly named term. But that's why I tell people to get rid of their iPhone. I think it's a weapon system. I don't own one. I've never gotten addicted to the wonderful, I mean, it's a very clever technology, and I can imagine how hard it is to let it go. I mean, gosh. But I really am serious. You should get rid of it. So this is my thought, and this is the thought that took me through the Geoengineered Transhumanism book. We cannot solve a problem with the same kind of thinking that created it. All right, so with that in mind, I'm going to take off now on, I've given you all the basics of what has been discovered in the last 13 years, in fact, quite a long time ago, and now how it correlates with what's going on now, the type of biotech that we're having to deal with from the sky and from the inoculations, et cetera. So we cannot solve a problem with the same kind of thinking that created it. Now, just to remind you, our electromagnetic spectrum, we can see almost nothing. That teeny weeny little rainbow bit, that's all we see in the electromagnetic spectrum. Meanwhile, there are all sorts of forces, all sorts of entities that exist in those other increments. Do you realize that? We just can't see them. We can't hear them. But they are there. But now, the scientists who are running the geoengineering programs in service to the secret space program, they have the instruments to see into those realms. They have access to those realms. You see where I'm going with this? So let's not fool ourselves anymore. Millimeter waves. Okay, that's what 5G is, right? 5G is millimeter waves. Here, I'm going to read something about the imagination from Rudolf Steiner. You all know I'm a student of Rudolf Steiner, many years, 45, I think. Edward de Boer said, Rudolf Steiner differentiated clearly between the spiritual concept of imagination and our everyday understanding of the word. As living pictorial thinking, imagination is a primary aspect of the contemporary path of inner schooling, the first of 3 levels of initiate knowledge and cognition. So it's part of thinking. Imagination leads us into a world of flowing, living pictures, a realm of soul and spirit in which everything is in continual motion. And that's the book it's from. So I'm putting this in here because now I'm going to sort of take off on something I haven't done before in a presentation, because I want people to realize what you need in order to encounter this. This is not a matter of being depressed. This is not a matter of going home and crying and wishing you lived in another world, in another planet, in another time. That's not the new type of thinking we need. And we do need everybody to give it the good old effort. It entails imagination, not where you're thinking up some wild and crazy fantasy where you're the hero in your own little drama, but where you can have very vivid imaginations, very vivid mental pictures of this technology. It's very exciting to work with yourself, and that's why, I write these books. My hope is you read them. It isn't just a matter of your intellect I'm looking for. In fact, I'm not looking for your intellect at all. I'm looking for your ability to build clear mental pictures of this technology, whether it's right or not, whether it would pass muster with the Department of Defense. I'm not concerned with that. But to really build your imagination, because I have found Americans to be so lacking in imagination. I don't know what has happened to us as a culture, but we've been beaten to death by our school systems. I was fortunate. I'm old, and I was able to live in a time when the schools were not nearly what they are now. So I read early, and I fantasized, and I think I was a little liar, too, because I didn't know the difference between a fantasy or what I was seeing inside and lying for quite a while as a child. So I wanted you to see that, because now I'm just going to go, and I might move pretty fast because I have only almost 9 minutes. Okay, there is my favorite enemy to despise, Lockheed Martin. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do. So they're imagining, why aren't we? Let's get busy. We already have the means to travel among the stars. Well, I'm not sure of that. But these technologies are locked up in black projects. It would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Is this a Lockheed Martin ad? Yeah, it is. See how they tell you the truth when they're arrogant and they don't care? They don't care that you know things. That's Ben Rich. He was a very interesting guy. All right, and then we know this, we've read about this, about how the land masses have changed on this living earth that we are honored to live on, this living planet. We know that. We can imagine that. You look at Africa and you know that, gosh, it looks like that edge of South America. Well, it was. It was all Pangaea. So your imagination is right a lot of the time. And then we can imagine this, I hope. So we're moving around the ecliptic, 70,000 kilometers an hour. How come you don't know you're spiritual beings? Having an earth experience. That's what's going on. And we're only here for a little while, so let's use every minute to figure out what's going on here and to play our role. Because not one person in here is here by accident. You all chose to be here on this planet during this time where evil is making its big move. We are so fortunate to be here. No fear. Okay, that's good. All right, this is the North Pole on Saturn. Now, I'm willing to believe NASA on this. I don't believe NASA wholesale, though. But it makes sense. There's the hexagon that Lynn was talking about. She mentioned the hexagon and the blockchain. This hexagon, the hexagon is what, if any of you have ever had DMT or any of those wonderful psychedelic substances, this is part of the chemical configuration of it, and it's right next to a pentagon. But that is the North Pole of Saturn. Not the color, just the geometry. And here we have the quantum dots that are manifesting as hexagons. And the quantum dots, that's where we enter the realm of nanotechnology. This is a quantum dot is a nanotech. On Facebook, Carly LeBrun, a former engineer at MIT's Lincoln Laboratory, shows a video produced by magnifying skin at 225 times. Quantum dots are revealed in Morgellon sufferers, man-made artificial atoms with their electrons confined in 3 space. Electronic properties range from semiconductors to discrete molecules. Glittery in the sunlight, they change color. And then this, just the peak, because I'm supposed to be done in a little over 3 minutes. This is Sean Gautreaux, he lives in New Orleans. Really imaginative, really can see things amongst the cloud cover above us, mainly craft, exotic propulsion craft. In motion. This is a diagram he did to show how he sees them, because, I have seen a couple of things, but I don't belabor myself to see it. This is an infrared photograph of an entity that Trevor James Constable saw in the California desert on August 25th, 1957. He entitled it Amoeba Number 1. It was huge. And see his little eyes there? Cute. He saw lots of them. So did Wilhelm Reich in the desert where the air is dry. We remember this from medieval art in the 15th century. We see what looks to us like UFOs, like saucers. But to them, it may have been something completely different. They didn't have the name UFO that the press smears all over everything that happens in the sky. And then we have these plasma tubes reaching up to the plasmasphere. And this is what it looks like when you look up one. And you may see that. You could see it from down here. You may see a sunset that suddenly looks weird. Might be that plasma tube. And then we see things like this. And then this is plasma frequency, which is a little creepy because some guy is sitting on a laptop somewhere and he's messing around with his monitor, is what I think. See what you think. So he's changing the frequencies in order to manipulate the plasma in the cloud, to condense it, to make it move. All right, that's as far as I'm going to get, and I want to read my last, I would like to show one thing. I'm going to just whip through. What else are they finding inside the serums? well, besides that? I wish I could show you that. Too bad. No, it's not in the book. That's brand new. But it is in the next one, the one I'm going to write when I get home. There, I wanted you to see that. That has been found in the serum. That has been found in the blood of the post-vax. Okay, they're putting computer equipment inside the body. And do you think it's just for fun? No, it's to run us through the software and hardware in our blood. Okay? All right, I'm just loaded with good news. Thank you so much.